The Orioles, you could argue, played well enough to sweep the Oakland A's weekend in Baltimore. But unfortunately, after two Craig Kimbrel blown saves, the Orioles dropped the series over the weekend. I'll recap what went right and what went wrong for the O's at Camden Yards over the last 3 days, coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, April 29th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' weekend series loss to the Oakland A's as the O's dropped 2 out of 3 to kind of a sparky, a little more alive Oakland team this year, although the O's had a chance to sweep this series. 2 blown saves from Craig Kimbrel this weekend led directly to those 2 losses. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from all 3 games this weekend. We'll talk about Kimbrel, what his future is if he's going on the IL. We'll talk about another great start from Cole Irvin, a not so great one from Albert Suarez, and what that means for those two as Means and Bradish are almost ready to come back. We'll talk about the bullpen as a whole, the offense continuing to swing it well, and much, much more. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So we will begin today's episode with a tough Sunday loss. Final score from Sunday afternoon at Oriole Park at Camden Yards is the Oakland Athletics 7 and the Baltimore Orioles 6 as the A's took the rubber match, winning 2 out of 3 from the Orioles and the O's after dropping 2 of 3. Now 17-10 on the season through 27 games, heading into a huge 4-game set with the New York Yankees starting tonight. The Yankees, who have a 1-game lead over the O's in the AL East at the moment. But I'm going to start by getting you the 5 things you need to know from Sunday's loss. And the first thing you need to know is Craig Kimbrel might not just be hurt, but might be injured. Now, as I record this right around 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday evening, we don't know if Craig Kimbrel is actually going to be placed on the injured list for the Orioles. What we do know is he blew 2 saves this weekend and did not look right. I want to focus on the Sunday outing. We'll talk about the Friday outing as well in a little bit, but it was his second blown save of the weekend. Kimbrel comes in the 9th inning with the Orioles leading the A's 6-5, looking for a series win, coming off of by far his worst outing of the year. That was Friday night, which we'll get to. And, his command was kind of bad. His velocity, though, still looked okay. He was getting swings and misses. He just seemed like an off night. He gets the day off on Saturday, but even coming into Sunday, it was his 5th outing in 9 days. And that's not what you want from 35-year-old Craig Kimbrel. He was already a little overworked. And I was a bit worried about, coming off a bad outing, still didn't get enough rest. How is this going to affect him? It seemed like it was clearly more than just not enough rest, because Kimbrel went out there and it was pretty much a disaster. 4-pitch walk to Darryl Hernaiz, the former Orioles prospect, to begin the inning. All 4 pitches were fastballs that were way outside. Like, all of them were mostly in the same spot, like a little low and a 1.5 feet outside to the righty. 4 in a row. Boom. You get a walk. Now, you could tell something was not right. And the next batter, Kyle McCann, comes up, and Kimbrel still can't find the strike zone. And Brandon Hyde and Drew French, the pitching coach, and Brian Ebel, the head athletic trainer, they come out to talk to Kimbrel. And you could tell, just the way didn't look at like it was something in the delivery, and the velocity was good, so that wasn't down. That's not what triggered it. But Hyde said it after the game. He said he didn't like how Kimbrel was moving around after he delivered his pitches. And you could tell in the broadcast, even Kevin Brown said he might be hurt. And then almost immediately, Hyde came out of the dugout. They talked to him. He threw a couple of warm-up pitches, which were in the strike zone, I believe, and he said he was good. And I don't blame Brandon Hyde for trusting the word of his 35-year-old future Hall of Fame closer in Craig Kimbrel, who, despite Friday's outing, had been really, really good for the Orioles this year. And Hyde said he was concerned about an injury, but the athletic trainer was out there as well. And Kimbrel said he felt fine with the warm-up pitch. They seemed to give the okay. and he stayed in the game. Like, you can't just pull him from the game unless there's an injury. He has to face 3 batters unless he gets injured, and they felt he was okay. Well, he was able to find the strike zone. It was 6 straight balls before he threw his first strike, but you could tell he was a little worried about how he was finishing. He literally did not throw a curveball. Now, Kimbrell was only a 2-pitch pitcher with a fastball and a curveball, and his curveball command's been a little iffy the last week or so, but he wasn't even thinking about throwing a curveball. It was all fastballs. The velocity was still good, but it was kind of erratic all over the place. He gets to 3-2 to Kyle McCann, and then he throws one at 95 right down the middle, and McCann blasts it into right center field for a 2-run homer, flips the game, puts the A's up 7-6, and Hyde and the trainer come back out. That was it for Kimbrell. He leaves the game with the injury, and Hyde after the game called it a upper back tightness, basically an upper back issue after the home run. And the way Hyde talked after the game, now we don't know, but it seemed like, Kimbrell was still getting tests or was getting looked at. He wasn't available to the media after the game. It seems like he might be going on the injured list with this. And like, this was a clear injury. You could tell the way he was throwing the baseball. This is not just, oh, he blew a second straight save. We're going to fake an injury so we can take him out after 2 batters because of the 3-batter minimum. Like, no. This was a real injury that Kimbrell had sustained. Now, we don't know if it was also bothering him when he struggled Friday night. Did it just come up in the outing on Sunday? Whatever it was, it didn't look good, and he did not look right after a lot of those pitches. Now, I personally probably would have pulled him after that first meeting at the mound. After the trainer looks at him, I just would have pulled him out of the game. When you have that injury, you get unlimited time to warm up another reliever and bring them in the game. But I don't blame Brandon Hyde for, again, trusting the word of his 35-year-old veteran future Hall of Fame closer when he goes out there and Hyde was concerned and Kimbrell says, I'm fine, I want to stay in the game. Like, I don't mind putting that trust in your players, especially your veteran players, your guys who are, almost 15-year big leaguers at this point. Like, maybe it's a rookie second-year player, I'm a little more skeptical, but your veteran guys who know their body better than anyone, I don't blame Hyde for that. It was just an unfortunate scenario, the way that game ended on Sunday. You've got these overworked late relievers. Now, the Orioles pitchers are doing a good job eating innings, and the Orioles bullpen, I think, is in the bottom 10 and just in terms of innings thrown so far this year. So it's not like the entire bullpen is overworked, but they just continue to have to go to these main guys in the pen. And I think that has really been the issue here, is that they just have to keep going back to Coulomb and Cano and Kimbrell over and over and over again. And that's becoming the issue here. So we'll keep our eye on the news with Kimbrell, but just not a good weekend for him. I will say, though, like, I saw a lot of arguments like Kimbrell shouldn't have even pitched the 9th after what he did Friday night. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, he had been so good this season coming into Friday's outing. He had a sub-1 ERA. He'd only blown 1 save, and that one was basically a ticky-tack, super unlucky blown save in his first outing against the Royals. He'd been nailed since then. And yeah, he'd allowed a couple of base runners in Anaheim, but he still saved both of those, and the stuff's looking really good. He's your 9th inning guy. That's what you paid him to do. He's just not Felix Bautista, and especially if he's got a back injury. Now, nobody's Felix Bautista, but especially if he's got a back injury, he is certainly not Felix Bautista. And so now we just kind of wait and wonder, okay, how will this play out over the next few days? Now, the second thing you need to know from the Orioles' loss on Sunday is that the rest of the bullpen, both before and after Kimbrell, really did a solid job, at least, of getting the ball to Craig Kimbrell in the first place, because we'll get to it in a minute. The Orioles only got 4 innings from their starter on Sunday. Keegan Aiken came in, 2 perfect innings out of the bullpen. He was great. You saw even Dylan Tate, who came in for Kimbrell, went 1-2-3 to keep it a 7-6 game. Now, Danny Coulomb did give up a home run to our old friend Tyler Nevin, but otherwise, he was good in this one. Jacob Webb got a big out. Yennier Cano had a really nice looking scoreless inning in the 8th to keep the Orioles up 6-5. Like, the rest of the pen was still looking good, but I still think there's an issue, and that is the overuse of the main guys in the pen. Now, some of the issue is the Orioles aren't blowing out teams. Now, it was nice that they did win 7-0 on Saturday, and we'll get to that coming up next. But in general, they're not getting blowout wins. Also, when they're losing, now it's 17-10 on the season, they're not losing blowout games either. They're generally losing close games. They're staying in games. Their offense is coming back late in games, which means, even sometimes when you lose 12-1, right, it sucks. You don't want it to happen. But at the very least, if you do lose 12-1 and you're able to have like a lesser reliever eat 2 or 3 innings, maybe you can throw a position player for an inning. At the very least, you can rest like your closer and your setup guy when that happens, right? Like that's the silver lining of those games. The Orioles don't have a whole lot of those kind of losses on the ledger either. So they're constantly using Coulomb and Cano and Kimbrell and even Jacob Webb as well. I mean, after all 3 of those guys, Coulomb threw as well in the game Sunday. For Yennier Cano, that is now 5 outings in the last 9 days. For Craig Kimbrel, that is also 5 outings in the last 9 days. And for Jacob Webb, it's 5 outings in the last 8 days for him. These games are close. The O's are trying to win them, and they are just kind of forced to continue to go to these guys because the mushier part of the bullpen is not super reliable right now. Like, I would throw Keegan Aiken in with those other 4 of guys that Brandon Hyde trusts, but he certainly doesn't trust Yohan Ramirez. You got him down there with 4 days off, but they don't want to use him. You certainly don't trust Mike Baumann. And I know Dylan Tate did a nice job in the 9th on Sunday, and he pitched a scoreless 9th to end the game Saturday, but Tate really still hasn't been, except for Friday or Sunday, excuse me, if you consider that a high leverage situation, which I really don't. He still hasn't even been thrust into a high leverage spot at all because I'm not sure Brandon Hyde trusts him at this point. The stuff is still down. It's been a little bit of smoke and mirrors despite solid numbers from Dylan Tate. So even though it's not complete overuse of the bullpen, it's overuse of that inner circle of guys. They are pitching too often, and that was the issue with Cano last year. He pitched too much, and he wore down at the end of the year. That's been the issue with a lot of guys over the last 2 years for the Orioles. They have leaned on this bullpen a lot for the last 2+ seasons. And I think Brandon Hyde tried early this year to stretch guys out a little bit more, give them more off days, but there's just been so many close games that the O's need to win, and the bullpen has come up big. But as you pitch more and more, there is research that shows that a reliever, just a pitcher in general, but relievers specifically, get worse with every pitch they throw throughout the season. Every pitch they throw, they get a little bit worse and a little bit worse just because it's that wear and tear on your arm of throwing so much. And now maybe the return of the currently injured pitchers will help this, and I would think it should, but the O's just need, and I would love them to be wins rather than losses, obviously. They just need some blowout wins. But here's the thing, the Yankees are coming to town for 4. This is going to continue to be an issue. And another reason why it did become a little bit of an issue is the third thing you need to know from Sunday's loss, and that is Albert Suarez was not dominant this time. After back-to-back awesome starts, 5 2/3 scoreless both times to begin his Orioles career, Suarez did not do that on Sunday in his third start in an Orioles uniform. The veteran Albert Suarez goes just 4 innings, throwing 83 pitches, and he just was not crisp. He allowed 4 runs on 7 hits. He did strike out 6 and only walk 1, which is nice to see. Did allow a solo homer to Seth Brown as well, and only allowed 5 hard hit balls despite 7 hits. I thought the fastball was still good. The velocity was still there from Albert Suarez. He was still sitting 95. He was up to 97, even touched 98 once in the game. You still like to see that. He still got 11 whiffs on that 4-seam fastball. That is a very, very high number. The issue with Suarez in this game is the secondaries, which he doesn't super rely on. He's still over 50% fastballs most of the time, but the secondaries were not there. In his first start, the cutter was really there to help him. In his second start, the changeup was really there to help him. The cutter was like okay at best in this game. The changeup was bad, and that was the issue. The changeup was really good in his last start. Changeup not there at all for Albert Suarez in this game. 15 changeups out of his 83 pitches. 10 of them got swung at. Only 2 were missed. 6 of those changeups were put in play. Some of them hit very hard as well. That's where he gave up a lot of the damage was on the changeup. That pitch helped him in the first 2 starts, didn't help him in this one. And although that fastball is good, you still need a good secondary pitch to be a good big league starter. He had it in the first 2 starts. He didn't have it in this one. The command was okay. It wasn't as good, but wasn't the biggest issue. Again, he only walked 1 guy, and it was just the issue that changeup was much more hittable. So now it begs the question of, okay, is Albert Suarez headed to the Orioles bullpen? John Means made what has to be his final rehab start in Norfolk on Sunday and finally looked dominant. 7 scoreless innings, 8 Ks, 1 hit, and 1 walk. You will take that, even though it's against AAA hitters. And Brandon Hyde said earlier this week that Kyle Bradish's next start is going to come in an Orioles uniform. He said he doesn't know quite when, but the O's named their starters for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. It is TBA for Thursday afternoon against the Yankees. That would line up perfectly for Kyle Bradish to come back and start that game. So with Means coming back, with Bradish coming back, is Albert Suarez, after this one rough start, the guy who heads to the bullpen? I tend to think yes, not as much because of this one start, but just because maybe that stuff can play up even more in 1 or 2 inning stints. The Orioles seemingly need a long reliever in that bullpen. Brandon Hyde kind of said he wanted one, and that could help with like just too much pressure on these late inning guys. Maybe that could be a fix here for the Orioles. Fourth thing you need to know from Sunday's loss is that the Orioles offense was the long ball in this one. Like it's been a lot of times this year, one of the major league leaders in home runs. They hit 3 more of them in Sunday's game. Adley Rutschman had a solo homer in the third that made it a 4-3 game. Ryan Mountcastle later in that inning, a 2-run shot that kind of flipped this game, put the Orioles up 5-4 at the time. Mountcastle went 424 feet in that one, both of those coming off the A's starter, Paul Blackburn, who was pretty much just as bad, if not worse, than Albert Suarez. And then Ramon Arias got his first home run of the season, a solo shot hit to the opposite field in the fourth off Blackburn, 105 off the bat, snuck it over the wall to make it a 6-4 Orioles lead at the time. And it's nice to see Ramon Arias getting a home run in that spot. The fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 7-6 loss to the A's on Sunday is that almost everyone else contributed on offense. Gunnar Henderson was really surprisingly, I mean, he's been the Orioles' best hitter this year. He was the only guy who didn't do anything. Henderson had an 0 for 5 in the game Sunday. Everybody else either delivered an RBI or at least got on base in this game. It continues to be a 1 through 9 attack for the Orioles. I mean, you had Ryan Mountcastle, not just the homer. He had a 3-hit game. Cowser had a hit, Mateo had a hit, and even McKenna had a hit off the bench in this game, and O'Hearn and Rutschman had the homer, and Santander had a walk, and Cedric Mullins had an RBI. Pretty much everybody up and down the lineup was contributing. However, we did have to see Jorge Mateo and Ramon Arias in the same lineup. And the reason was Jordan Westberg was unavailable for Sunday's game. Hyde said after the game he had a stomach bug. He was not available to appear at any time. So that's why you got Arias and Mateo in the same lineup. And that's not going to happen generally if Westberg's okay. But, you know, when you send Jackson Holliday down, as the O's did on Friday, you're one little injury, little, nicked up body part away from having Arias and Mateo in there. And you don't generally want that. And the Westberg issue was also why, if you were wondering, why did Jorge Mateo not get pinch hit for in the bottom of the ninth to lead it off against Lucas Ursig? Well, it was either Mateo or McKenna. I'm still taking Jorge Mateo as a better hitter than Ryan McKenna. You said, well, why wouldn't you hit Heston Kjerstad? Well, McKenna was due up 4th in the inning. So your thought is, okay, if Mateo can get on base, he could steal 2nd and 3rd. Even if he does it, we'd rather have Kjerstad hit for McKenna. Unfortunately, the O's went down 1-2-3. It didn't get to Kjerstad's spot, but that is why Mateo hit in that inning. Hopefully Westberg's all good and will be in the lineup tonight. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for the Orioles. They did get one win in this series. It was one of their more complete wins of the year. It came on Saturday. And coming up next, we are going to recap that Saturday win. That's right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. Now, Mother's Day is coming up, and you want to make your mom smile? Well, start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. That's right, with DoorDash. Does she have a sweet tooth, a tech enthusiast, a beauty connoisseur, or is she outdoorsy? No matter what she's into, you can make mom smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and more. And you can get it all from DoorDash. And you can shop with savings that would make her proud with a Dash Pass membership. You'll save and get a $0 delivery fee and reduce service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees apply and terms apply as well. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's code LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monopoly Go, which really for me brings out my competitive side. Now, I know you're saying, oh, you've already talked about Monopoly Go, haven't you? Well, in Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends, cool new playing pieces for travel boards. They've got hilarious emojis for taunting your friends as well. And plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or There's a lot more. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. That's Monopoly Go. Game on. So the Orioles did drop the series to the A's this weekend, but they did not get swept because the Orioles do not get swept. And the reason they didn't is because they won the Saturday game 7-0 in game 2 of the series. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that 7-0 victory over the A's on Saturday. And the first thing you need to know is Cole Irvin did it again. Now, it was the little Cole Irvin revenge game. I think we learned that the Orioles won the trade, considering Darrell Hernaiz only had a 1-for-3, and Cole Irvin threw 7 scoreless innings in this game. 4 hits, 5 strikeouts, no walks, 89 pitches for Irvin through those 7 innings. Just 4 hard hit balls by the Oakland offense against him. And don't look now, but Cole Irvin, after 6 2/3 innings scoreless last weekend in Kansas City, and now 7 scoreless against the A's, he's got a 3.49 ERA on the season so far. I mean, he was Oakland version of vintage Cole Irvin in this game. Is it a lot of strikeouts? No. 5 and 7 innings, but doesn't walk anybody. Lots of soft contact, only 4 hard hit balls. Yeah, it was only 7 swings and misses, but it doesn't really matter because a strikeout pitcher, that is not who Cole Irvin is. And again, it wasn't crazy fastball velocity. He touched 93 and 94, but he was more so sitting 92, and that's generally what you expect from Cole Irvin on that fastball. He had a good curveball once again. He got some changeup whiffs against right-handed hitters, which is big for him. He mixed in the cutter. He mixed in the sinker. He just mixed those 89 pitches in general. 34 seamers was the most he threw of any pitch. Throws the kitchen sink at you, keeps you off balance, and all of a sudden you blink, and I get it, right? The A's, they are one of the worst offenses in baseball, so that is a caveat here. But you blink and it's 7 scoreless innings. And against any major league offense, 7 scoreless is impressive. So that's back-to-back incredible starts from Cole Irvin. And that's where it leads us to the second thing you need to know from Saturday's game. After that performance from Cole Irvin, can you really put him in the bullpen after that? Because as I mentioned already, John Means just finished up his rehab outing with a great start Sunday in Norfolk. He has to be activated by, I believe, either Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm not sure exactly what the date is, but Means wouldn't even be available to pitch until Friday anyway on regular rest. But it's Tuesday or Wednesday. He'd either have to be activated or placed back on the injured list. And it seems like he's not injured. So he's coming back to the Orioles Tuesday or Wednesday, and they're probably going to have him start a game Friday or Saturday of this weekend. Kyle Bradish. Brandon Hyde said he's ready to go. His next start will be in the big leagues, most likely lined up to start the Thursday game at home against the Yankees, which is listed as a TBA right now. So he's rejoining the rotation. In theory, you got to clear 2 spots. Now, one seems like it would be Albert Suarez. 2 good starts, 1 bad one. But I like how the stuff plays. It could play up in the bullpen. The O's aren't just going to cut bait and DFA Suarez. They'll probably just move him to the pen. That opens 1 spot. But where do you open the other spot? You're not going to take Corbin Burns or Grayson Rodriguez out of your rotation for obvious reasons. So you're looking at, okay, we're putting Bradish and Means in there. We got to clear out 2 guys. Suarez is one of them. Are we clearing Irvin? Are we clearing Kramer? I don't think you are on either of those guys. I mean, Dean Kramer could maybe pitch out of the bullpen, but the Orioles value him so much as a starter, and Irvin has just been so good these last 2 starts. I mean, he was the guy who I figured would go to the pen. I mean, when I thought the O's were healthy to begin the year, I thought Irvin was going to start in the pen. But it's got to be hard to tell a guy you go to the bullpen after back-to-back starts of 6 2/3 and 7 scoreless. I think eventually it's Cole Irvin who goes to the bullpen if Means and Bradish are healthy and right. But maybe they do go with a 6-man rotation just for a little bit, just to feel out Bradish and Means for a couple of starts to see what they can do. Maybe they toy with those guys a little bit. Now, there are 2 issues with the 6-man rotation, though. One is you already have a bullpen that's, at least the back end of it, is pitching a little too much. When you go with a 6-man rotation, you cut your bullpen from 8 relievers down to 7 relievers. That means you have less pitchers to use in the bullpen, and it can tax you even more. The other thing is, on a 6-man rotation, you're just seeing Corbin Burns less often. That's not a good thing. Now, one thing they could do is just still have Corbin Burns pitch every 5 days and just shuffle the 6-man rotation around him. but you want to maximize the amount of pitches you're getting from Corbin Burnes. That guy's a Cy Young contender. You want him out there every fifth day, no matter what. But it's something interesting because do you want to pull Kramer? Do you want to pull Irvin right now? No, you don't. And it's even hard to pull Albert Suarez even after the bad start Sunday because of how good he was in his first two starts. Like the Orioles, legitimately, if they trust Means and Bradish coming back from injury, are going to have 7 legit starters on this roster right now. So it's going to be interesting. I think Suarez loses one spot. I just don't know if it can be Irvin. So maybe the 6-man is in their future. Now, the third thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Saturday is that it was bombs away again for the top of the Orioles order. A bunch of homers as well in this one. Adley Rutschman hit a solo homer in the 5th inning for the Orioles. That was their first home run of the day, 416 feet over the Great Wall of Baltimore. And then Ryan Mountcastle goes back-to-back with Adley. He goes 398 feet, 112 off the bat. I don't know if this is the case, but it might be the first time the Orioles have gone back-to-back with both homers going over Baltimore since that wall was built in 2022. That was pretty fun to watch. And then Gunnar Henderson capped it off with a 2-run homer in the 7th to put the Orioles up 7-0. It was kind of a big fly ball that just landed into the flag court in right field, but it came off a lefty for Gunnar. It was J.P. Sears, the starter for the A's, was somehow still in there in the 7th inning in a 5-0 game, and the Orioles did jump all over Sears. But Gunnar Henderson now, this year against left-handed pitching. Now, it's only 47 plate appearances, so it's not a huge sample size, but against left-handed pitching this year, Gunnar is hitting 341 with a 404 on base and a 683 slugging, 3 homers, and a 207 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Compare that to last year against lefties. Gunnar had 167 plate appearances against lefties last year. So basically 4 times the amount he has so far this year. He also only had 3 home runs in that span. Hit just 209 with a 293 on base and a 324 slugging. That's a 75 WRC plus against lefties. You're wondering why Gunnar Henderson looks even better and looks like an MVP candidate this year? It's because the one weakness in his game last year, hitting lefties, he's at least so far figured out, and he is even more dangerous and even more fun to watch. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' 7-0 win over the A's on Saturday is that it was another day, not just of homers, but of the entire lineup getting involved. This time, there was also one guy who did not reach base, just one lonely guy, and that was Colton Cowser. But, you know, he's done enough hitting and enough getting on base for multiple players so far this season. But otherwise, everybody contributed. Gunnar Henderson had 2 hits. Jordan Westberg had a couple of hits. Even Jorge Mateo drew a walk in this game to get on. And the Orioles also just kind of smashed the baseball. I mean, James McCann had a 1-for-4 with an RBI, but he had 3 hard hit balls in this game. The Orioles had 14 total hard hit balls against J.P. Sears, the starter for the A's, who has been really, really good so far this season coming into this start. I mean, Anthony Santander had an RBI double that opened up the scoring, put the O's up 1-0 in the 4th inning. It was the hardest hit ball of his career, roped it down the left field line, 113.5 miles per hour off the bat for Santander. Hardest hit ball of his career. That's pretty impressive as well. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the O's win on Saturday is that the 7 scoreless from Cole Irvin, the big day for the offense, well, that made it very easy for the bullpen and made it very easy for kind of the cushier middle part of the bullpen to go out there. Mike Baumann did give up a hit, but got a strikeout and a scoreless 8th. Dylan Tate walked the leadoff man, but got a double play, and eventually on just 8 pitches, got a scoreless 9th to end the game. I was a little surprised that Yohan Ramirez didn't pitch in this game. Again, hadn't pitched in 3 days. You're up 7-0. Feels like a good time to get him back in there to show why you're rostering him. Now you have some relievers tired, and Ramirez hasn't pitched in 4 days because he didn't pitch all weekend. Is a little interesting. However, the O's got through and won that game 7-0. And they needed that win to avoid the sweepless streak ending. It is now at 100 consecutive series in the regular season. The Orioles haven't been swept, but they did lose this series at home to the A's. And Friday was kind of similar to Sunday in that the O's felt like they were going to win this one and that it was scraped away in the top of the 9th inning. We'll talk about what happened Friday to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. And you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. at FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. So the Orioles dropped the series over the weekend, 2 out of 3 against the Oakland A's, and it began with a loss on Friday night that was fairly crushing. Final score, the A's 3 and the Orioles 2 Friday. I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that one as well. And the first thing you need to know is Corbin Burnes had a little bit of iffy command at times, but otherwise was still really great in another just fantastic start for Burnes in an Orioles uniform. He goes 6 innings, allowing just 1 run on 3 hits, 6 strikeouts, and 3 walks. That was his first 3-walk game in an Orioles uniform. Of course, he allowed a solo home run in the first inning because that is what he does. Shea Langeliers took him deep to put the A's up 1-0 in the first, but that was it for runs against Corbin Burnes in this one. Through 97 pitches, A's did get him for 7 hard hit balls, but it was when he was throwing it in or near the strike zone, it was a swing and miss party for Corbin Burnes. 20 whiffs on 48 pitches, 5 on the cutter, 9 on the slide, 3 on the curveball, and 3 on the changeup, which had some, he threw some of the nastiest changeups I've seen from him with the O's in that start on Friday night. Mixed the stuff really, really well against that Oakland order. It's Corbin Burnes. What else can you say? The guy's really good. He was worth the trade. I love having an ace. The O's haven't had a true ace in a long, long time. It just keeps getting better and better. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles' loss in 10 innings to the A's on Friday night is that the bullpen, besides Craig Kimbrel, which we'll get to in a moment, really kept the O's on top and kept them right in this game. After Corbin Burnes came out of the game, they went to Danny Coulombe, and they kind of had the script written for them. Like this is what the Orioles want their bullpen script to be. They want to get 6 strong innings from a starter, whether it's Corbin Burnes or whomever. They go to Danny Coulombe to get a couple of outs. They go to Yennier Cano, who all 4 changeups that were swung at by A's hitters swung and missed at against Cano on Friday night with the 4 outs he got. And then you go to Craig Kimbrell. You're up 2-1, top of the 9th inning. Kimbrell, who, did allow a little bit of traffic during the week in Anaheim, but saved both games in that O's series win. Got the day off Thursday, comes back to pitch Friday, and just didn't really have it. Now, when you compare Friday's outing to Sunday's outing, again, both blown saves for Craig Kimbrell, they look very different. Friday was bad in the fact that he faced 5 batters and didn't get anybody out. But Friday, he was much closer to the strike zone. The command was better, and he didn't openly look injured most of the time he was out there, which makes me think the injury either came right at the end of Friday's outing or came during Sunday's outing, that Friday was just kind of a bad blow up by Craig Kimbrell. He started well. He got ahead of the first batter of that 9th inning in Brent Rooker, but then on a 3-2 pitch, he allowed a double. Then he walks J.J. Bleday. Then Abraham Toro hits an RBI double to right field where Ryan McKenna could have caught it. It was a tough play, but he could have caught it. We'll get to that later, but that ties the game at 2 with runners on second and third. And then he walks Darryl Hernaiz, and what would have been loading the bases and putting a tough spot. But while he was facing Hernaiz, he throws a wild pitch that Adley makes a great play to go and get, tosses it to Kimbrell, and they tag the runner out at home to keep it a 2-2 game. Kimbrell faced 5 batters. He didn't retire any of them. The only out he got was on a wild pitch and a throw out at the plate. He then walks Lawrence Butler, and his day is done at that point. Bases loaded, 1 out, now a 2-2 game. And shout out to Keegan Aiken, right, for coming in, getting a strikeout and a pop out to keep the game tied. Even shout out to Jacob Webb, who did give up the zombie runner to score in the top of the 10th, but almost got out of that inning. But Kimbrell just didn't have command. It was better than the command was Sunday, but just didn't look okay. And you could argue, hey, he was left in a batter too long. Like, they shouldn't let him face the lefty Butler, who he eventually walked. But when you've already used Coulombe and Cano, are you really going to pull your Hall of Fame closer in Craig Kimbrell, who had a sub-1 ERA coming into this game, so you can bring in either Jacob Webb or Keegan Aiken in the 9th inning for a save? Like, I don't really think you're going to do that. Now, they eventually had to go to Aiken because Kimbrell didn't have it. But I get why he was left in that long. It was kind of a blow-up outing. And now you do wonder with Kimbrell, okay, was he already injured? Because then, of course, it got way, way worse when he went back out there Sunday, but it was a blown save. Shout out to Aiken for keeping it tied, but the Orioles just couldn't get it done. Of course, Webb gives up the zombie run in the 10th, and the O's eventually lose the game. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from Friday's game is that Cedric Mullins did go yard again. Not a great night for the Orioles offense. Only 2 runs against Ross Stripling, who hadn't been great this year. O's had only 6 hits in this one, but Cedric Mullins did hit a home run, which was his 6th of the season in now 100 plate appearances on the year. And it makes you think, hey, maybe that 30 home run power we saw from Cedric Mullins in that amazing all-star season in 2021, maybe it's still in there for Mullins. He's had a great year so far this season. Solo shot in the fourth, 101 off the bat, 377 feet that put the Orioles up 2-1 at the time. Just fun to see Cedric Mullins continue to swing it. And then the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 3-2 loss in 10 innings to the A's on Friday night is that we kind of saw how Brandon Hyde will use Heston Kjerstad and Ryan McKenna off the bench, at least while he has them, before, Austin Hayes comes off the IL and the Orioles make any other moves. Kjerstad, as I predicted when he was called up last week, I said Heston Kjerstad is basically going to be used as a pinch hitter because with Mountcastle and Santander and O'Hearn and Cowser and Mullins, there's just nowhere to play Kjerstad consistently, even against right-handed pitching. So I said, because Holiday is now in AAA and either Ramon Arias or Jorge Mateo is going to start every single game until Holiday returns, I said, Kjerstad, if either Arias or Mateo are up in a big spot late against a righty, Kjerstad will pinch hit. That is exactly what we saw in the bottom of the 10th inning. Kjerstad comes up, zombie runner on second, 1 out, O's trailing 3-2 against the incredible right-handed closer Mason Miller for the A's, and Kjerstad pinch hits. Unfortunately, he grounded out to second for the second out of the inning, but that is where we're going to see him. He was about to pinch hit in a similar spot. He ended the game on deck in the loss on Sunday, but just a brief shout out to Mason Miller, who is ridiculous. If you want to know how other teams felt facing Felix Bautista the last few years, it's how we felt as Orioles fans facing Mason Miller on Friday night. Also, shout out to TJ McFarland, who pitched twice in this series and is still pitching in the big leagues. Good for him, old friend TJ McFarland. And then for Ryan McKenna, he came in defensively for Anthony Santander in right field in the 9th inning. That's generally how Brandon Hyde has used him over the last couple of years. Unfortunately for McKenna, listen, the RBI double for the game, and it's a tough ball. The toughest ball for outfielders is a line drive hit right at you, but over your head, because you can't turn to one side, can't turn to the other side. You got to kind of completely turn around and run straight backwards. It's the toughest thing to do. However, StatCast did say that ball had an 85% catch probability. It wasn't an easy play, but I think McKenna made it look tougher because he got a bad jump, got a bad read. And again, still kind of a hard play to make, but when you're Ryan McKenna and when everybody's kind of upset already that you're here and you haven't exactly made the best plays in your time as an Oriole, and you're just kind of here to be a defensive replacement, the bar is raised a little bit for the standards of what you need to do. And again, it was a tough play, but making that catch maybe changes that 9th inning. Maybe the O's get out of there with the win. Your margin for error is much smaller if you're Ryan McKenna, and that was how he did on his first test back up in the bigs with the Orioles. But to lose the game in the 10th, they lose the series to the A's. Now they got to regroup and take on the Yankees. A Yankees team that's offense was struggling until it got to Milwaukee this weekend. And they forced the Brewers to use position players to pitch in the final 2 games of the series. They scored double-digit runs in both those games, 1, 2 out of 3. Their offense is humming. They come in for a 4-game series in Baltimore starting tonight, 6:35 p.m. Eastern time start. Clark Schmidt, the right-hander, goes for the 19-10 New York Yankees, first matchup between the O's and the Yanks this year. Schmidt with a 3.55 ERA over 5 starts this season. His last time out against Oakland, they got him a little bit. 3 runs, 4 hits, 6 Ks in 5 1/3 innings. And he will go up against Grayson Rodriguez, who is coming off his worst start in a long, long time. In Anaheim last week, gave up 7 runs on 11 hits and 4 1/3 innings. Otherwise, he's been great this year. Hopefully, he gets back to greatness in game 1 of a huge, huge April and May series tonight. And then I will be back with you on the podcast tomorrow, recapping game 1 between the O's and the Yanks, and looking a little deeper into maybe, okay, what are the Orioles really going to do when Means, when Bradish, maybe even CNL Perez come back to this pitching staff later this week. But that's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.